People often ask me when my marriage fell apart. They expect me to tell them about a screaming argument, a shocking confession, or the moment I caught my husband cheating. The truth is, my marriage ended on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Not because I found proof, but because a 16-year-old girl walked into my bakery carrying a photograph that changed everything I thought I knew. My name is Emma Carter. For nearly 12 years, I believed I had built a simple, happy life. Every morning before sunrise, I unlocked the doors of Carter's Corner Bakery. The smell of fresh bread greeted me before anyone else did. Warm cinnamon rolls, butter croissants, chocolate chip cookies cooling on metal racks. It wasn't just my business. It was my dream. One I'd spent years kneading into existence with sore hands and sleepless nights. The bakery wasn't fancy. It sat on the corner of Maple Street in a neighborhood where people still knew each other's names. Parents stopped by after dropping their kids at school. Retired couples shared coffee every Thursday morning. Construction workers grabbed muffins before sunrise. Teenagers ordered cupcakes for birthdays. It wasn't just a bakery. It was part of the neighborhood. And I loved every second of it. My husband, Daniel, used to say the bakery smelled like home. Whenever he came back from a business trip, he'd walk straight behind the counter, wrap his arms around me, and steal a warm cinnamon roll before I could stop him. I'd pretend to be annoyed. He'd kiss my forehead and laugh. Best bakery in the city, he'd say. I believed him. Maybe because I wanted to. Daniel worked as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company. His job required constant travel. Some weeks he was home every night. Other weeks he disappeared for 3 or 4 days at a time. At first, I admired how hard he worked. His promotions paid our mortgage, helped us renovate the bakery, allowed us to take a vacation every summer. Whenever people asked how we'd stayed happily married for so long, I'd smile and answer, "We trust each other." At the time, I truly believed that was enough. Our biggest heartbreak wasn't money. It wasn't work. It was the family we never had. For years, we tried to have children. Doctor appointments became part of our routine. Blood tests, specialists, treatments, hope, disappointment, repeat. Eventually, we stopped talking about it. Not because it stopped hurting, because saying it out loud hurt even more. Instead, we poured our love into other things. I baked. Daniel worked. Life moved forward. Or at least, I thought it did. Looking back now, the warning signs were always there. I just refused to see them. Daniel began taking more weekend trips. "They're expanding my territory," he'd explain. His phone buzzed constantly. Whenever it rang after dinner, he'd step outside before answering. If I asked who called, it was work. Always work. There were hotel charges I didn't recognize. Restaurants in cities he claimed he never visited. One month, I noticed he'd withdrawn several $100s in cash. When I asked about it, he laughed. I needed cash for clients. The explanation sounded reasonable, so I accepted it. Love has a strange way of turning obvious questions into uncomfortable silence. And silence is much easier than doubt. One evening, my best friend, Nora, visited the bakery just before closing. She watched Daniel rush outside to answer another phone call. When he came back inside, he looked distracted. He kissed me quickly and said he had an early flight the next morning. After he left, Nora stirred her coffee quietly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Has Daniel seemed different lately?" I smiled. "He's just stressed." She looked unconvinced. "I hope that's all it is." I laughed. "You've watched too many crime shows." She forced a smile. "Maybe." Neither of us mentioned it again. Spring turned into summer. Business was booming. We started offering custom wedding cakes, corporate catering, weekend baking classes. I was busier than ever. Ironically, the more successful the bakery became, the less I noticed what was happening at home. Sometimes Daniel returned from trips carrying expensive gifts, perfume, jewelry, flowers. I assumed he felt guilty for being away so often. Now, I wonder if those gifts were meant to silence his own conscience. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Business slowed to almost nothing. Dark clouds covered the sky. Rain tapped gently against the front windows. I was frosting cupcakes when the little bell above the bakery door chimed. I looked up. A teenage girl stepped inside. She couldn't have been older than 16. She wore a faded denim jacket that was slightly too big for her. Her long brown hair was damp from the rain. She looked nervous, like someone who wasn't sure she should have come. I smiled warmly. "Come in. You must be freezing." She glanced around the bakery before walking toward the counter. "Are you Emma Carter?" "I am." My smile remained. "How can I help you?" Instead of answering, she reached into her backpack. For a moment, I thought she might pull out money or a phone. Instead, she carefully removed an old photograph. She slid it across the counter toward me. I picked it up. It was a picture of Daniel, much younger, standing beside a woman I'd never seen before. The woman was holding a newborn baby. I frowned. "I'm sorry. I don't understand." The girl swallowed nervously. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she looked me directly in the eyes. "I think." She paused, struggling to find the words. "You're married to my dad." Everything around me seemed to stop. The ovens continued humming. Rain continued falling outside. Customers laughed somewhere near the cafe tables. But inside my head, there was only silence. I stared at the girl, then at the photograph, then back at her. There must be some mistake. She shook her head slowly. "I wish there was." My hands began trembling. "What's your father's name?" She answered without hesitation. "Daniel Carter." The room suddenly felt too small, too warm, impossible to breathe in. I looked at the photograph again. There was no denying it. It was Daniel, younger, smiling, holding the tiny hand of a newborn. A newborn who, if this girl was telling the truth, was standing in front of me. I forced myself to remain calm. "When was this taken?" "I think 16 years ago. But I only found it a few weeks ago." She looked down at the floor. "My mom never wanted to tell me who my dad was. She said it was complicated. After she got sick, I found letters, photos, his name." She looked back at me. "So I searched for him. I found your bakery online." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know he was married." I felt my knees weaken. I reached for the edge of the counter to steady myself. For 12 years, I'd believed I knew everything about my husband. His favorite movie, his coffee order, his childhood stories, his dreams. Yet somehow, I'd never heard a single word about a daughter. Not once. The girl quickly wiped away a tear. "I'm sorry. I didn't come here to hurt you. I wanted to meet him. I wanted to know why he never wanted me." Those words shattered something inside me. Because in that moment, I realized two things. If she was telling the truth, then my husband had lied to me for years. And this frightened young girl standing in my bakery was just as much a victim of those lies as I was. I looked toward the bakery door. The rain had finally begun to slow. Somewhere across town, Daniel believed he was finishing another routine business trip. He had no idea that the life he'd carefully built on secrets had just walked through my front door carrying a photograph. And before the day was over, every lie he'd spent years protecting was about to come crashing down. There are moments in life when time seems to split in two. One version of you exists before the truth. The other is forced to live with it. As the teenage girl stood across the bakery counter, holding back tears, I knew I would never be the same woman who had unlocked the bakery doors that morning. I invited her to sit in one of the booths near the window. The lunch rush had ended, and only 2 customers remained inside. I brought us each a cup of hot chocolate. She wrapped both hands around the mug, but didn't take a sip. "I don't know your name," I said gently. She looked up. "Sophie. It's nice to meet you, Sophie." She gave a sad little smile. "I wish it were under different circumstances." "So do I." For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been circling in my mind. "Does your father know you're here?" She shook her head. "No. Has he ever met you?" Again, she shook her head. "Not that I remember. My mom said he left before I was born." I frowned. But then, why look for him now? Sophie's fingers tightened around the mug. My mom passed away 3 weeks ago. The words landed like a stone. I'm so sorry. Before she died, she told me there were things she should have told me years ago. After the funeral, I found a box in her closet. She reached into her backpack again. This time she pulled out several old envelopes tied together with a faded blue ribbon. They're letters. From him. I carefully unfolded one. The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel's. Even after 12 years of birthday cards and anniversary notes, I recognized every curve of every letter. The first sentence made my heart pound. I'm sorry I can't be there this weekend. Another letter read, I'll tell her the meeting ran late. Another, one day I'll explain everything to both of you. My hands began to tremble. The dates stretched back years. Not months. Years. I looked up slowly. How many letters are there? I stopped counting. And your mother kept all of them? Sophie nodded. She said she hoped he'd eventually do the right thing. She swallowed. But he never did. By closing time, my mind felt numb. I wrote my phone number on a receipt and handed it to Sophie. If you need anything. She hesitated. Why are you being nice to me? The question caught me off guard. I looked into her frightened eyes. Because none of this is your fault. For the first time since she'd walked into the bakery, she cried openly. I walked around the counter and hugged her. She felt impossibly small. Like a child carrying an adult's heartbreak. That evening, I drove home with the photograph sitting on the passenger seat. The entire drive, I kept hoping there was an explanation. A misunderstanding. Anything. But deep down, I already knew. The letters had erased every excuse. Daniel arrived home just after 7. He walked through the front door carrying his overnight bag. Hey, he smiled. I brought your favorite chocolates. Normally, I would have hugged him, asked about his trip. Instead, I quietly placed the photograph on the dining table. His smile disappeared. He stared at it for several seconds, then slowly looked at me. Where did you get this? A girl brought it to the bakery today. His face lost all color. What girl? I held his gaze. Your daughter. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. He sank into a chair without saying a word. So, I whispered. Tell me. He covered his face with both hands. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked up. Her name is Sophie. I know. You've met her. I know. His voice shook. I never wanted you to find out like this. I laughed bitterly. Oh, how were you planning to tell me? On our 20th anniversary? Our retirement? Or maybe never? Daniel lowered his eyes. I met her mother before I met you. It wasn't a serious relationship. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. You left? He nodded. I was 24. I wasn't ready. I felt anger rising inside me. So you disappeared? I sent money. I wrote letters. But I never had the courage to be part of her life. I stared at him in disbelief. That explains the letters. It doesn't explain the lies. He closed his eyes. There's more. Every instinct in my body told me I wasn't going to like what came next. About 6 years ago, I found out Sophie's mother was struggling. She'd lost her job. She was raising Sophie alone. So I started helping. I nodded slowly. Financially, at first. And then, I visited. My heart stopped. Visited. He looked away. I told you I had business trips. The room spun. The hotel charges. The cash withdrawals. The weekends away. Every missing piece suddenly fit together. How often? He answered so quietly I almost didn't hear him. Every month. For 6 years. I stepped backward. You lived 2 lives. Tears filled his eyes. I kept telling myself I was fixing my mistake. No. I shook my head. You were creating another one. Daniel tried to reach for my hand. I stepped away. I never stopped loving you. His words only made the pain worse. If you loved me, you would have trusted me with the truth. I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. You lost me the moment you decided I didn't deserve honesty. That night, neither of us slept. The house felt unfamiliar. Every photograph on the walls suddenly looked like evidence instead of memories. Around 3 in the morning, I quietly packed a small suitcase. Daniel stood in the hallway watching. Please. We can fix this. I zipped the suitcase shut. No. You had 6 years to fix it. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. There were no dramatic courtroom battles. No arguments over money. Just signatures. Silence. And the painful understanding that some promises can't survive the weight of repeated lies. Throwing myself into work became my way of breathing again. I expanded the bakery. Added a cafe. Started weekend pastry classes. Hired 2 new bakers. Every loaf of bread. Every birthday cake. Every smiling customer reminded me that life was still moving forward. Slowly. So was I. Almost a year after the divorce. The bell above the bakery door chimed again. I looked up from the display case. Sophie stood there. She looked older somehow. More confident. But her nervous smile hadn't changed. Hi. I smiled warmly. Hi, Sophie. She stepped closer. I hope it's okay that I came. It is. She looked around the bakery before quietly asking, can we talk? We sat at the same booth where she'd first told me the truth. This time, she accepted a cinnamon roll. My dad's been trying to make things right. She stared down at her plate. But there's something he never told you. I frowned. What do you mean? She reached into her backpack one more time. Inside was a sealed envelope. Across the front, in Daniel's handwriting, were just 3 words. For Emma alone. I stared at the envelope. Whatever was inside. I had a feeling it would reveal the final secret my ex-husband had been carrying for years. People think the hardest part of betrayal is discovering the lie. It isn't. The hardest part is deciding what kind of person you'll become after the truth. For months after my divorce, I believed my story had already reached its ending. Daniel had lied. Our marriage was over. I was rebuilding my life. Then Sophie placed that envelope on the table. And suddenly, there was one more chapter one hadn't expected. The bakery had grown quiet. Only the soft hum of the espresso machine filled the room. I looked at the envelope for several seconds before opening it. Daniel's handwriting covered every page. The first sentence made me stop breathing. If you're reading this, it means Sophie found you before I found the courage to tell you everything. I continued reading. He wrote about meeting Sophie's mother when they were both young. They had dated for only a few months before drifting apart. Weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. Daniel admitted that he panicked. Instead of facing the responsibility, he ran. For years, he convinced himself that sending money was enough. That writing letters made him a father. Deep down, he knew it didn't. The letter continued. When I met you, Emma, I wanted a fresh start. I told myself my past belonged in the past. I believed if I worked hard enough, loved you enough, and buried my mistakes deeply enough, they'd disappear. Instead, every lie demanded another lie. I lowered the pages. Not because I couldn't continue. Because every sentence confirmed what I'd already learned. Secrets never stay buried. They simply grow heavier. Then I reached the final page. There, in slightly shakier handwriting, Daniel confessed something I hadn't expected. I never built 2 families. I built one family and abandoned another. By the time I tried to repair what I'd broken, I no longer deserved either. I read those lines twice, then quietly folded the letter. Sophie watched me carefully. So, what do you think? I looked across the table. I think your father made terrible choices. She nodded. I know, but I also think. I smiled gently. You've spent your whole life paying for mistakes you never made. Her eyes filled with tears. I always wondered why I wasn't enough. I reached across the table and took her hand. Oh, Sophie, this was never about you. When adults choose fear over honesty, it's children who carry the consequences. She wiped away her tears. I almost didn't come to your bakery that first day. What changed your mind? She laughed softly. My mom used to say, if someone spends their life baking bread for strangers, they probably have a kind heart. I smiled through tears. Your mom sounds like she was wise. She was. Over the next few months, Sophie became a regular visitor. Sometimes she stopped in after school. Sometimes she helped decorate cookies during busy weekends. She had never baked before. Her first batch of croissants looked more like folded blankets than pastries. We laughed until we cried. By her fifth attempt, they were almost perfect. Almost, I teased. She grinned. I'll get there. You will. One Saturday morning, the bakery was packed. As customers waited in line, Sophie quietly handed a cupcake to a little boy whose family couldn't quite afford one. The boy's face lit up. After he left, I smiled at her. Your mother would have been proud. She looked down shyly. I hope so. I realized something then. Kindness has a way of surviving, even after loss. It finds new hands to live through. About a month later, Daniel called. It was the first time we'd spoken in nearly a year. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Hello. His voice sounded hesitant. Hi, Emma. I heard Sophie has been spending time at the bakery. She has. There was a long pause. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. I do. I couldn't give her the childhood she deserved. But you've given her something I never could. I frowned. What's that? A place where she feels wanted. His words lingered with me after we hung up. For the first time, I truly felt sorry for him. Not because he'd lost me. Because he'd spent years believing lies could protect the people he loved. Instead, they had only left him standing alone. A few weeks later, the town held its annual harvest festival. Every local business set up booths along Main Street. Our bakery had its busiest day of the year. Fresh pies, cookies, hot cider. Lines stretched halfway down the block. Around noon, I noticed Daniel standing quietly across the street. He wasn't trying to approach me. Or Sophie. He simply watched. Sophie noticed him too. She looked at me. What should I do? I smiled gently. What do you want to do? She thought for a moment, then walked across the street. I stayed where I was, giving them the space they both deserved. From a distance, I watched father and daughter talk for nearly 20 minutes. There were tears, awkward smiles, a long hug. It wasn't enough to erase 16 years. Nothing could. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is the bravest thing two people can choose. That evening, after the festival ended, Sophie returned to help me clean the bakery. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her. I think my dad and I are going to keep trying. I smiled. I hope you do. She hesitated. Does that hurt you? I thought carefully before answering. No. It reminds me that healing looks different for everyone. As the months passed, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. The bakery expanded once again. We opened a small reading corner where customers could enjoy coffee and homemade pastries. Sophie started working there on weekends while finishing high school. Customers adored her. Mrs. Jenkins always requested Sophie serve her tea. The neighborhood children asked for her by name. Little by little, she stopped introducing herself as the girl searching for her father. She became simply Sophie. One spring afternoon, she arrived carrying a college acceptance letter. She burst through the bakery doors before I even looked up. I got in. I laughed. I knew you would. She threw her arms around me. I couldn't have done it without you. I held her tightly. Yes, you could have. You just needed someone to remind you. A few weeks later, on the morning she left for college, she handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a wooden plaque. Hand-carved. Simple. Beautiful. Across the front it read, "Family isn't only who shares your past. It's who stands beside you while you build your future." I traced the words with my fingertips. No expensive gift could ever have meant more. Sometimes customers ask about the photograph hanging near the bakery register. It's a picture of me and Sophie, both covered in flour, laughing over a tray of ruined croissants. They assume she's my daughter. I usually smile. Then I answer honestly. No. She found me when we both needed family. And somehow, that's become even more meaningful. If this story touched your heart, remember this. Lies may protect the truth for a little while, but they always come with a cost. Honesty can be painful, but deception is almost always more painful in the end. The family you're born into matters. The family you marry matters. But sometimes, The most meaningful family is the one built through compassion, forgiveness, and choice. Because love isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by the people who show up, tell the truth, and stay when life becomes difficult. The end. Thanks for listening my life story and experiences. I hope you love the story.